Welcome to another live WDCB broadcast from PianoForte, 1335 South Michigan Avenue in Chicago. I'm Barry Winograd, and we're continuing our series Jazzfest Week broadcast today and tomorrow with a pair of live morning events. A quick program note, Riverwalk Jazz has the week off, but it'll return in its regular time slot next Saturday, 10 a.m. In just a moment, we'll bring you an interview and live set with the Chicago pianist, composer, teacher, Robert Irving III, who will be performing with his Generations project on Sunday afternoon at the Chicago Jazz Festival tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m., we'll bring you a live interview and performance with pianist Ryan Cohn. Admission is free if you'd like to attend in person here at PianoForte. WDCB's Jazz Fest Week broadcasts are made possible in part by North Coast Brewing Company, Atomatic Research, and Steve Maxwell Vintage and Custom Drums. WDCB brings you the special broadcast in cooperation with PianoForte, whose mission is to preserve and promote piano culture in Chicago and beyond. More info at pianofortefoundation.org. We now welcome to the PianoForte stage Mr. Robert Irving III. And Robert, really good morning.
Good morning to all those morning people out there.
Yes. We're very happy to have you here, and congratulations. There's a new CD on the horizon and a new band out at the Jazz Fest. And, let's start there and talk about that. Let's talk about your new band, Generations. Tell us about who's going to be with you at Jazz Fest tomorrow at 3:30 on the Von Freeman stage.
Yeah, so the band, if you will, started about a year ago. So this is our first year anniversary, actually in September this month.
Well, congratulations.
And so we're celebrating that with also the release of the new CD, or the pre-release of the CD in Chicago. It's entitled Our Space and Time. And the band consists of 3 saxophones, including my wife, who's a co-founder of the band, Laurence Destival, who's from Paris, France. We got married about 3 years ago. And so we're also celebrating an anniversary at the fest. And just backing up a little bit, the band started as a Miles Davis tribute project. And as you know, in years past, I've brought in Gary Bartz or Wallace Roney or some other Miles alums. And so my wife said to me, well, you know, you are a mentor with the Jazz Institute. Why aren't you bringing in some of the young people who you mentored the same way that Dizzy did for Miles and the same way that Miles did for you?
Well, the tradition of jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thought about it, and it sort of evolved into that kind of project with beginning with Irving Pierce, who is a 20-year-old just burning alto tenor saxophone player here in Chicago, who came up through the Jazz Links mentoring program, and also Rajiv Halim, who is a designated soprano and flute in our band, but he plays all of the horns, of course.
Right, and his band played Jazzfest yesterday.
Just yesterday, we were there, and it was amazing. Yeah, and so and these happen to be 2 of my wife's favorite saxophones, and so she's playing alto, and then my cousin Charles Heath, who's in the house today, of course on drums, and Emma Dayhuff is the bass player. So she plays primarily acoustic, but we got her on electric on one tune, and a few wordless vocals kind of there in the background. And the guitarist is Scott Hesse.
All right.
And we have a long history of work together around the world.
And of course,
too.
You're playing acoustic and electric keyboards?
Yes, I'm playing Fender Rhodes on a couple things, and primarily acoustic piano. It's all my original composition, so it's kind of a showcase, an opportunity for me just to write for this specific ensemble, which is really exciting.
Well, and it's also a unique opportunity to write for people that you've not only known for a while, but you've seen grow as musicians and continuing to grow as musicians too. Well, speaking of unique compositions, you think you could play a couple for us at the piano?
Sure, why not?
All right. What are we going to hear?
Well, I'm going to go back to New Momentum, my last CD that was released in 2008, and a couple tunes, a couple of my favorite pieces from there. One being Havila or Havala, as some people prefer, and in the tune Always, Sometimes.
Okay.
All right.
This is Robert Irving III. You're listening to WDCB 90.9 FM and WDCB.org. His two compositions, Havala and Always Sometimes. We're coming to you live from PianoForte Foundation, 1335 South Michigan Avenue here at WDCB. And I'd like to remind you that Robert is here, and tomorrow at 10 a.m. you're welcome to join us at 1335 South Michigan, as Ryan Cohn will be here as well. Robert, wonderful songs.
Thank you.
Yes, very wonderful. And we were talking, and it's something that seems to be coming up a lot in our conversations this morning, is the word mentor.
Yes.
And mentor equals teacher in many ways, but there's more to it than that, of course. A teacher can show you certain things, but a mentor, I think, also includes inspiration.
Absolutely.
And your early mentors, well, you were mentioning your mother earlier, and gospel music, and the blues, obviously.
Yes.
Do you take those early inspirations and share them with your own mentorites, mentorees? What do we call them?
Well, I guess it's sort of
Mentees?
Yeah, mentees. Well, yeah. I mean, it's hard to not be sort of a conduit for the continuity of what came before us, you know. And and in my case, my family, ironically, probably is one of the largest gospel music families on the planet, I would say.
Wow.
But it's kind of a well-kept secret because everybody's all around the country doing what they do, and pretty much probably about a combination of maybe 25 ministers who are all musicians. I mean, just consummate musicians, and that includes the family of my cousin Charles Heath. And so a lot of organists, drummers, obviously, multi-instrumentalists, singers, who've done a lot of things in North Carolina, Virginia, and around in this area as well. And so, so I kind of grew up in that environment, and I was a trombone player primarily throughout school. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, you know, you wanted to bring it up, not me.
But it was my band teacher at Hirsch High School, George Hunter, who stressed that all horn players focus on piano as a way to sort of extend what you do on your horn, and to be able to see it and view it from a different perspective, and beyond just the linear. And so I was one of those students who was curious, and I asked him a lot of questions. And so he'd keep me after class and show me things on the piano. And I just seemed to get the big picture of the theoretical aspects and the shapes on the piano at a very, very early age. Sometimes he would take me out with his big band, the Moonlighters.
Okay.
And I would set up the music stands at like the High Chaparral and the Club de Lisa. And then he would let me sit in. And the guys in the band at that time were you know, L.D. Young, Red Holt, you know. And Louis Satterfield was a bass player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and sometimes he would play trombone. This is prior to Earth, Wind, and Fire, of course.
Right.
And some of the other members of Earth, Wind, and Fire came from that band, too. So that was my beginnings. And so a lot of times a rehearsal would involve just pulling out a chart and playing it in all 12 keys and going home. That was the rehearsal for them. And so that was the kind of, you know, training that I got at an early age. And because the church was a place where there was a piano, because I didn't have one at home, and there was an organ, I had a place to practice. And so I was able to sort of grow a little bit more quickly and rapidly, along with the mentorship of the various musicians in the family. And so, of course, that sort of kind of becomes a part of what I do. It's kind of the background, the foundation, as it were, of everything else that's built on top of it. But I think the pivotal thing was that when my mother passed away when I was 14, and so we moved to North Carolina, sort of by default in a way. And so growing up down there in the Bible Belt, there was absolutely no jazz. There was no jazz stations. There was country, western, and gospel. That was it, and pop. And so I had to really seek out the jazz roots that I had developed in Chicago by going to the record shops and researching the list of albums, jazz albums, and I'd see something interesting, and I'd have to order it, order it. And that's how I kind of stayed in touch.
Well, it keeps your want happening.
Right.
Can't wait for the mail. Is it here yet?
Right.
Yeah. And those were LPs, folks.
And those are
weren't
LPs,
CDs.
absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
So now you, You've got me thinking a couple different ways, but Chick Corea used to say how when he was on Miles's band, Miles really never said much to him at the piano.
Right.
Once in a while, I'll show him a few notes.
Right.
And you mentioned on your first recording, New Momentum, about working with Miles and Wayne Shorter, and obviously they were mentors. Did Miles ever sit down with you at the piano and say, hey, here's this, that, or whatever?
Well, at the very, very beginning, the story, he heard one of my compositions over the phone, and he sent for the band to come to New York to record that one song. And that turned into like 2 months, workshop at his brownstone, developing what became the Man with the Horn.
Okay.
So the first day, Miles sent the limo over for me, and I said, well, what about the rest of the guys? He said, no, just you. I said, okay. So I get there, I ring the bell, and he answers, and he's surprised that I'm short like him. That was his first comment. And immediately he wanted to give me clothes. But then we went upstairs, and we talked about my background in music, and so then he asked me to go to the piano and play. So I kind of wandered over to the piano, and I pretty much exhausted my whole, just sort of
Your repertoire.
sensitivity, and he was like a doctor diagnosing the deficiencies that he saw or heard, and he came around to the piano and put his hands over my shoulders and said, check this out. And he played these harmonies that, with the tension and release that just blew my mind. First of all, I didn't know he played piano, but this is the same thing that Dizzy told him. Said, if you're going to be serious about the trumpet, you got to play the piano.
Right.
And Dizzy was, of course, himself a consummate pianist. And so that moment was just an epiphany. It was like a light bulb turning on in my head in terms of harmonic possibilities. So that just opened me up for life. I was forever changed after that day. And so for the next hour, I sat there at the piano just exploring these colors and ideas, and he just sat there nodding, saying, "Yeah, you hear that? You see that?" So he was like really happy that I got it, and I was like a sponge. I just absorbed this stuff. So from that point on, it became a part of who I am as a composer, as an arranger, as a musician. And I think about Wayne, Shorter. For me, he is the composer for this age, and he told me once. He said, "Bobby, a song is never completed. A composition is never finished. It's always evolving. It's always developing." And I quite literally took that to mean that as we perform the music, and it naturally starts to expand because of various expressions, the kind of freedom of expression that happens on the bandstand allows new things to happen. And so we go back, and I call that the same way that Miles did with the band when I was there for those years. And we would develop the composition further. So it's a little bit frustrating for some of the musicians. They get to rehearsal, and there's yet something more that I'm adding to the composition. But it's a living thing. It's a living,
and the
growing thing.
musicians, they grow.
They grow,
They
yeah.
learn new sounds, new ideas to bring to it.
Yeah.
And, Duke Ellington's very famous for rewriting his tunes all the time, and he had the same band. It wasn't like there was a new bass player or something.
Absolutely.
Well, there might have been, but
Yeah.
Well, can we get you to play another song?
Sure.
Or two?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
So maybe I'll do something from those gospel roots.
Okay.
And then maybe something from one of my favorite composers. So we'll see.
All right. We'll be surprised. That's Robert Irving III. We're live at the PianoForte Foundation, 1335 South Michigan Avenue in Chicago. You're listening to WDCB, 90.9 FM, WDCB.org. Robert Irving III on WDCB 90.9 FM, WDCB.org. We're live here at PianoForte, 1335 South Michigan Avenue in Chicago. And I'd like to remind you that tomorrow, Robert Irving III and his Generations Band will be performing at the Chicago Jazz Festival, 3:30 p.m. in the Von Freeman Pavilion at Millennium Park here in the city of Chicago. Yeah. All right. Those were wonderful songs. And, well, I didn't recognize the first one.
Well,
Not being a church-going
yeah,
guy, I'm
yeah,
afraid.
it's actually a gospel classic, and it was written in probably 1876, I believe. And the two writers, I can't recall the names, but I'm certain that they were Chicago-based.
Oh, okay.
Because the lyricist actually was, I guess inspired is not the right word, but the lyric actually came from losses that he suffered in the Chicago fire.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
it's called "It Is Well with My Soul." So it's sort of talking about the aftermath of all of this trial, but it's still well with me within. So,
Yeah.
and it's a kind of a just a classic that's been around forever in terms of my own family and experience. So, so I thought it was
And
good.
then you said the second one was from your favorite album?
Well, no. So for one of my favorite
Oh,
composers,
one of your favorite albums.
composers,
all right.
and which is Freddie Hubbard.
Right.
And Miles was a great musician, but he's not known as a composer. He was known more as an interpreter, and one who sort of inspired other composers and reshaped compositions. And like he would take my work and sort of reshape it and rethink it.
Sorry.
But you have like people like Freddie Hubbard,
Mm-hmm.
who was a great musician, but also at the same time a great composer, and Wayne Shorter, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of I like composition. I like
Mm-hmm.
work that
Well, when you did Code MD,
yes,
and that was part of Miles's repertoire for a long time.
yeah.
Did he reshape that? Did you say, here's the basic, and you guys started playing it, and he's
Well,
giving
yeah,
you
it's
different
like sort of like
suggestions here and there?
well, the way Code and D came about, I had composed the tune Outer Limits, which became Decoy.
Okay.
And I was in New York. Basically, he asked me to come to New York to mix his album,
Wow.
which I had no experience doing. But of course, I told him, yeah. He asked me, you know how to mix an album? I said, yeah. And it's funny.
2 eggs, some sugar. Yeah.
right. Like Wayne Shorter said, it's like scrambling eggs.
Yeah.
And so, so when I got to New York, I was under a lot of pressure and stress because I thought I was going to have to sit behind a Neve console, and be expected to, So I was so relieved to get to the studio when the engineer asked, what kind of assistance do you need on the mix? Do you want me to take control and you just sort of dictate what I do? And I said, yes.
Yeah. A little more bass, please.
And so, so prior to that, I had done The Man with the Horn in 1979, and it came out in '81. And Miles toured without a keyboard player for those years. Remember the first 2 years after The Man with the Horn, then he did We Want Miles and Star on Sicily and all that stuff.
All right.
So, so I was the first piano player actually to join the band after all those years of just electronic thing with guitar. So when he asked me to come to New York, and he said, if you got any tunes, bring them. So the tune that became Decoy was the only thing that I had a chance to write before going to New York. So of course, when I got there and he heard it, he was knocked out, and he said, "What else you got?" And I said, "Well, I haven't had a chance." So I ordered some equipment, to a piano, Fender Rhodes, and a sequencer to the hotel, and I wrote Code MD that night.
Wow.
So he didn't hear it for the first time until the next day in the studio when we actually started putting it together. Mm-hmm. And so he opted not to play the melody, actually, because there was a melody written for him. And so he opted he said, just let it be open. and he preferred just to kind of blow over it. And I thought that was an interesting choice. When I recorded it with Frank Russell a couple of years ago, Wallace Roney played it, and Wallace actually played the melody on it. So.
Yeah. No, it's a wonderful tune. And we should get back to mentors because there's a very special mentor that's going to be on television on Tuesday night.
Oh, wow.
You didn't think I was going there, did you?
Oh, boy.
Or a mentee, excuse me. Yes.
Wow. Well, yeah, my daughter, Sharon Irving, she made the semifinals on America's Got Talent. And so she's performing again on live television on NBC on Tuesday night, and you can vote for her.
Well, that's where we're going, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's Chicago. We vote early. We vote
Right.
often.
we know that process, right?
Yeah.
And then, so if she makes it to the finals, she'll be appearing the following week on the finals on the following Tuesday, the 15th.
And you were saying she's had some very encouraging words from folks associated with the show.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, could we get you to play another one that might be on this new recording, Our Space and Time, that
Sure.
you'll be featuring tomorrow, right?
Well,
At the Jazz Fest?
Well, the band itself being with three horns, a lot of the writing and melodic content is for horns, and so I'll play the one that's not.
Okay.
And it's a tune that was inspired during a trip to Europe during my birthday month, which is October, and so I appropriately entitled it Octobre with the French pronunciation. So
Okay, I'll trust you.
and this, incidentally, on tomorrow, this song will feature my wife, Laurence Destavel Irving, on alto saxophone solo, opening the song and an extended solo. So
All right.
definitely you want to come out and hear that.
We'll look forward to it. This is Robert Irving III, and again, he'll be at Chicago Jazz Fest, 3:30 Sunday afternoon at the Von Freeman stage. And this is from his new recording, Our Space and Time, Octobre on DCB. That's called Octobre. Robert Irving III. You want to do one more and then we'll come back? Or okay, you're going to come back. You're listening to WDCB 90.9 FM and WDCB.org. And don't forget, in the city of Chicago, you can find us on cable on Channel 42. Robert Irving III will be at the Chicago Jazz Festival with his band Generations. You'll hear that song tomorrow, beginning at 3:30 in the afternoon at the Von Freeman Pavilion at Millennium Park. And Robert Irving III is our guest here today. Tomorrow, I'd like to remind you here on WDCB, Ryan Cohn will be with us from 10 till 11 a.m. Now, Robert, I need to ask if folks want to keep up with you or get in contact, sonicportraitsjazz.com. Is that a good place to go?
Sonic Portraits Jazz is sort of a reviving of my label Sonic Portraits, which I released New Momentum some time ago.
Right.
So the plan actually is to develop the label. Frank Russell's was on this imprint. And I'm going to do a number of re-releases of my first album from 1988.
Wow.
A project that we did here at PianoForte, that produced by my wife and I, with the bridge, with musicians from France, and featuring Aubrey Brown, and several other projects and new artists. So the site is in development right now, so you won't be able to see anything just yet. But the plan is to launch it sort of commensurate with the national release on October 14th.
All right, so in about a month, write it down, jot it down, sonicportraitsjazz.com.
Yes.
And you'll be able to keep up with Robert and his bands and his projects and everything else. All right. Well, as a mentor, as a teacher, you've done a lot of things. You've taught your daughter very nicely. And, of course, you've been a mentee as well. But how do people, if they're interested in studying with you, is there a program that you're associated with?
Well, the Jazz Institute, for many years, I've been working with their Jazz Links program.
Okay.
And it's a program basically for students who are already involved in jazz and who want to get the exposure and sort of the opportunity to play with professionals like myself. So there are other professional mentors. And what's unique about what I've done with them is that we conceptualized the idea of doing an actual CD project that involved the students as the musicians, where I was able to teach them about publishing, encouraging them to compose if they weren't composers, do workshops in that area, and to teach them about the business aspects of production, management, and all the different areas. And so I think it was a really great experience for the kids. And as I said, Irving Pierce and Rajiv Halim were part of that program, and now they're part of Generations, our group.
Yeah,
And so,
they're an important part of the new generation of jazz that's
absolutely.
on the horizon.
Yeah.
All right, and the other question I had before we get you to play one more quickie, if that's all right.
Okay.
As a composer and arranger, and you've written for obviously just piano, and you've written tunes for different horn ensembles and different musicians. Do you sit down at the piano and just start, all right, here's a nice tune, and you start working on it, and you write it, and then you say, hey, that might be good with 3 saxophones and 14 trumpets or something like that, or how does that come about?
Well, it's an interesting question, and because my process is never the same. It's always different places where the music comes from, and ironically, a lot of it comes from dreams. And so I'll dream the music, like it's a radio playing in my head, and then I'll wake up. It takes a lot of discipline to get up sometimes in the middle of the night and go turn on the cell phone, dreaming it in the right key. Then I go right to the key.
any of the 12 will work. Yeah.
and then I'll develop it. But when I hear melodically, it'll sort of dictate what it's for, what project it's for, and then I'll sort of develop it for that project. Very seldom do I sit and just play and noodle around and come up with something. It's always something that I hear internally. And I think it's a lesson from Miles when he told me, always play what you hear.
All right. Well, we'd like to hear about 3 minutes of music.
Okay.
Think we can do that?
Sure.
All right.
So I think I'll close with another great horn player who's a composer, who's very much an inspiration to our tenor player, Irving Pierce, and it's a Coltrane tune that not a lot of people do. Straight Street.
Straight Street. All right. Robert Irving III, Straight Street. live from PianoForte in Chicago. You've been listening to pianist Robert Irving III in a live broadcast from the PianoForte studios in Chicago. Robert Irving III will perform with his Generations Project on Sunday at the Chicago Jazz Festival. His set will occur at the Von Freeman Pavilion, Millennium Park, beginning at 3:30 p.m. We'll be back here at PianoForte tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another live interview and performance. Pianist Ryan Cohn will be with us for the Sunday morning broadcast. Admission is free if you'd like to attend in person. Once again, that's here at PianoForte, 1335 South Michigan Avenue in Chicago. PianoForte's mission is to preserve and promote piano culture in Chicago and beyond. More information on upcoming events and programs at pianofortefoundation.org. WDCB's Jazzfest Week special broadcasts are made possible by North Coast Brewing Company, Etymonic Research, and Steve Maxwell Vintage and Custom Drums. A special thanks to Thomas Zoles, Victor Lejeune, and the entire staff at PianoForte for helping to make this broadcast happen. Thanks also to the team at WDCB who helped to put together this event, including Ken Scott, Dan Bindert, Bill Tennant, and Clarice Kavoris. Thanks especially to Robert Irving III for being with us for the broadcast today, and thank you for listening. I'm Barry Winograd. Let's head back now to the studio where Bruce Oscar is standing, and I hope you're standing, Bruce, and ready to bring you the swing shift here at 90.9 FM.